Before we open his books, we must open his chest. Franz Kafka, the man whose stories would later describe the nightmares of the 20th century. But before he was a writer, before he was a thinker, he was a frightened child in Prague. Born in 1883, Kafka entered the world already as an outsider, a German-speaking Jew in a Czech city, belonging everywhere and nowhere at once. Yet the true danger was not outside. It waited at home. His father, Hermann Kafka, was not simply strict, he was overwhelming. A man whose presence filled rooms, a man who believed strength was the same as authority. Franz was small, sensitive, and he learned early that sensitivity was a liability. One night, the child Franz asked for water. His father did not answer with words. He dragged the boy from his bed and locked him outside on the freezing balcony. The door closed. The lock clicked. Through the glass, Franz watched the warm room he was no longer allowed to enter. That night, he learned the first rule of his life. Power does not need to explain itself. Authority is absolute. He was eventually let back inside, but something never returned with him. Trust. How does a fragile child survive such a giant? He becomes invisible. Fear does not always create rebellion. Sometimes it creates silence. To survive his father, Kafka built a mask. At school, he was obedient, quiet, invisible. Education was not freedom, it was training. He learned how to sit still, how to obey rules he did not believe in, how to doubt himself before anyone else could. At university, he chose law, not because he loved it, but because it was safe. He later described studying law as chewing sawdust, dry, lifeless, necessary. But while his mouth chewed sawdust, his mind was alive. At night, exhausted and anxious, Kafka wrote, not with confidence but with urgency. Writing was not a dream for him, it was a duty, a second shift after obedience. During these years, Kafka met Max Brod. Max was everything Franz was not, loud, energetic, fearless, and Max saw something Kafka could not yet see in himself, a voice worth preserving. But school ended. The mask was complete, Doctor of Law. And behind it, the real prison waited. Education trained him to disappear. The office would teach him how systems erase people completely. Every morning, at exactly 8 o'clock, Franz Kafka entered the Workers' Accident Insurance Institute. Same street, same door, same desk. The routine was precise, relentless. Kafka's job was to calculate compensation for injured workers. Not their pain, not their loss, their value. A crushed hand became a number. A severed finger became a case file. A human life became a form to be stamped, signed, and archived. Kafka saw men reduced to paperwork. Here, tragedy did not cry out. It waited in folders. The machine was polite, orderly, and completely indifferent. Kafka was good at his job. Too good. His reports were praised, his efficiency noted. By day, he served the system with precision. By night, his body paid the price. He slept little. His lungs weakened. His head ached constantly. Writing did not come easily. Kafka wrote at night, after the office, after exhaustion. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to. Writing was not an escape. It was another duty, a second shift. In those pages, something began to emerge. The office was no longer just a building. It was a world view, a place where rules mattered more than people, where guilt existed without crime, where decisions were made by no one and enforced by everyone. This was not fiction. This was rehearsal. When Kafka later wrote The Trial, he was not inventing a nightmare. He was documenting one. 2 lives, 1 body. And slowly, inevitably, the body began to fail. After spending his days inside systems, Kafka discovered a terrifying truth. Systems do not stop at the office door. They follow you home. A man divided against himself often looks to love for rescue. Kafka did the same. But for Kafka, love was never simple. It was not comfort. It was exposure. To be loved meant to be seen, and to be seen meant to be judged. Kafka feared judgment more than loneliness. He met Felice Bauer. She lived in Berlin. The distance felt safe. Kafka did not court her with gestures or presents. He wrote hundreds of letters. Obsessive, meticulous, exhausting. Letters allowed control. They offered intimacy without touch, connection without risk. Kafka could choose every word. He could erase, rewrite, delay. Presence did not allow that. Twice Kafka proposed marriage, and twice he withdrew. Not because he did not love Felice, but because he loved his writing more, or perhaps because he feared losing it. Kafka believed that domestic life would destroy the fragile silence his mind depended on. Marriage meant routine. Routine meant noise. Noise meant death, not of the body, but of the voice. He once wrote, "Marriage is the punishment for my writing." So he chose solitude. But solitude was not peace. It sharpened his anxieties. It amplified his self-doubt. It turned every thought inward. Kafka was not avoiding people. He was protecting a space he did not know how to share. In choosing writing over love, Kafka secured his voice, but he sacrificed his shelter. And a man without shelter, no matter how brilliant, eventually feels exposed. When human connection becomes impossible, the self begins to fracture. And from that fracture, Kafka's most haunting transformation would emerge. And then, Kafka crossed a line. He stopped writing about fear and began writing from inside it. As Gregor Samsa awoke one morning, he found himself transformed into a gigantic insect. This sentence is often remembered for its shock, but the true horror is not the transformation. It is the reaction. Gregor does not scream. He does not panic. His first thought is simple. I'm late for work. That detail changes everything. Gregor's body has become monstrous, but his conscience remains obedient. He is still a worker, still a provider, still useful, or so he hopes. Kafka understood something deeply unsettling. In a world ruled by productivity, your humanity is conditional. As long as Gregor earns money, his family tolerates him. When he can no longer leave the room, the tolerance dissolves. Care becomes inconvenience. Concern becomes resentment. The family adapts. They get jobs. They reclaim the space Gregor once occupied. They grow stronger as he grows weaker. Gregor shrinks, not physically, but morally. He begins to see himself through their eyes, as excess, as burden. And then comes the father. Once again, authority returns, not with words, but with force. The apple thrown into Gregor's back lodges itself in his flesh and slowly rots. It is not just violence, it is judgment. The same judgment Kafka felt standing on the balcony as a child. The body becomes the site of punishment. Gregor dies quietly, relieved. Only after his death does the family feel free. They open the windows. They plant a future. Kafka does not describe this ending to shock us. He describes it to warn us. Because what Gregor experiences is not fantasy. It is the fear that once you stop being useful, you stop being human. This was not just Gregor's transformation. It was Kafka's confession. If the family could judge without mercy, what chance did anyone have against the law itself? Kafka's next nightmare would no longer take place in a bedroom, but in a courtroom. In the metamorphosis, you wake up transformed. In the trial, you wake up accused. Joseph K. is arrested one morning in his own bedroom. There is no violence, no handcuffs, no explanation. And that is the point. He is told he is under arrest, but allowed to go to work. He is guilty, but never told of what. Kafka understood something terrifying. Modern power does not need to punish loudly. It only needs to accuse. In this world, guilt does not come from actions. It comes from existence, from not fitting, from not obeying perfectly, from simply being present in the wrong place at the wrong time. Joseph K. searches for clarity. He looks for the court, but the court does not exist in one place. It hides in attics, in cramped rooms behind laundries, in spaces never meant for justice. Judges are distracted. Lawyers are useless. Rules change without notice. The process continues endlessly. Kafka was not describing an unfair legal system. He was describing shame. The same shame he felt as a child, standing small beneath his father's shadow. The same shame he felt as an employee, never sure if he was good enough. In the trial, the law is not external. It lives inside you. Joseph K. begins to defend himself without knowing the charge. He apologizes without knowing why. He adjusts his behavior, his posture, his thoughts. This is how power works best, when the accused becomes their own jailer. In the novel's final scene, two men escort Joseph K. outside the city. There is no resistance, no rebellion, only exhaustion. Joseph K. dies like a dog, not because he was forced to, but because he accepted the verdict. Kafka does not ask us whether Joseph K. was innocent. He asks something far more unsettling. Why did Joseph K. believe he deserved to die? Because the most effective court is the one you carry inside yourself. In the trial, guilt has no origin. In Kafka's next story, authority has no center. The nightmare would evolve, from accusation to endless exclusion. If the trial is about accusation, the castle is about access. A man known only as K arrives in a village. Above it, on a hill, stands the castle. It is visible, tangible, almost reachable, and yet it remains distant. K is told he has been summoned, but no one can confirm it. He is instructed to wait, then redirected, then ignored. Every road seems to lead closer, and then curves back on itself. Kafka shifts the nightmare. Here, authority does not punish, it delays. Phones ring endlessly, but no one answers. Officials speak politely, using words that mean nothing. Rules exist, but cannot be located. This is not fear anymore. It is fatigue, the exhaustion of constant effort without progress. Kafka understood this stage well. After years of obedience, after years of guilt, comes something worse than terror: resignation. K does not scream. He negotiates. He adapts his tone. He lowers his expectations. He accepts smaller humiliations in exchange for the hope of entry. The castle never rejects him directly. It simply never lets him in. Kafka never finished the castle. The novel ends mid-sentence. Some say this is a failure, but perhaps it is honesty. Because systems like this do not conclude. They do not collapse. They do not confess. They simply continue until the individual runs out of strength. The castle is not about reaching power. It is about living permanently outside it, seen, registered, but never acknowledged. Kafka wrote this story before automated systems, before call centers, before digital cues. And yet, we recognize it immediately, because the exhaustion he described did not belong to his century. It belonged to ours. Kafka is not a writer of the past. Kafka is a diagnosis. Today, his name is no longer a person. It is an adjective. Kafkaesque, a word we use when no one answers, when systems respond but never listen, When rules exist, but responsibility does not. You fill out the form, you wait, you comply, and still, nothing happens. Kafka did not imagine this world. He recognized its structure before it had screens, algorithms, or automated voices. Power without faces, decisions without authors, processes without endings. We call it efficiency. Kafka called it dehumanization. He understood something we still resist. The most dangerous systems do not scream. They whisper, they delay, they exhaust. And when you finally stop asking questions, they win. Kafka did not warn us about the future. He described the present before we learned how to name it. While the world was slowly becoming Kafkaesque, Kafka himself was disappearing. While the world was slowly becoming Kafkaesque, Kafka's body was collapsing. Tuberculosis hollowed him out from the inside. For Kafka, illness was not just pain, it was interruption, permission to stop, to leave the office, to step away from the machine. In his final years, Kafka found something close to peace with Dora Diamant. But even peace did not last. The disease moved to his throat. Words, his only refuge, became impossible. Kafka starved, not because there was no food, but because he could not swallow. A man who lived by language was silenced by his own body. Before dying, Kafka made one final request to Max Brod. Burn everything. Not edit it. Not publish it. Erase it. Was it self-destruction or control? Kafka feared unfinished things, and his life was unfinished. Max Brod stood at the edge of history. He did not obey. He did not hesitate. He saved the work and betrayed the man. Kafka died in 1924. He believed he had failed. History would disagree. Kafka's voice was gone, but the world was only beginning to speak his language. Franz Kafka died in 1924. He was almost completely unknown. Today, he is the voice of our hidden fears. We don't read Kafka to fall into depression. We read him to feel understood. Franz Kafka wasn't a magician. He didn't offer solutions. He didn't show escape routes. He was simply a fragile man afraid of Prague, afraid of life. But he had the courage to face that fear without blinking. He stripped away the lies we tell ourselves. Lies about family, about justice, about progress. And beneath them, he revealed a naked, trembling truth. He didn't leave us a map out of the labyrinth. He gave us a mirror in which we can see ourselves. Look into that mirror. If you see a little Gregor Samsa, if you feel a little like Joseph K., don't be afraid. That means you are awake. That means you are human. And as long as Kafka is with us, you are never truly alone. The case is closed.